I just want to get your initial reaction to what we heard from Mark Zuckerberg. He even mentioned that the steps they were taking will be very similar to what I would think is one of their rivals of X. What was your take on what he had to say?
A similar kind of take, Frank. I think that what we're seeing here is not super surprising. We're looking at a tech company who is basically saying, listen, we have to make sure that we are not in regulatory harm's way here. And so it's been very clear that the president-elect has stated very clearly that, listen, you're either with us or you're not. And so there is this retaliatory sort of flavor that's out there that I think many of the tech companies are responding to. And it's not surprising because I think it is pretty normal for most companies to say, you know, when a new presidential administration comes in, we want to make sure we're aligned for sure. I think what's critical here, Frank, is the idea that this is really the critical question that Facebook and Meta has been facing for a long time, which is to say, listen, are we really a news platform, or are we an agnostic vehicle where information flows through? And I think we're about to get our answer on that.
All right, so we're spending a lot of time, looking at what the possible motivations are, whether he's trying to align himself with the incoming administration or be more like X, all those kind of things. But I want to ask you, as someone who's a marketing expert, is there a business reason to do this? There's certainly been a public relations impact, but is there a business reason to do all this?
There absolutely is a business reason to do this, Frank. Let me just lay this out quickly. I think that a couple of things. First of all, it costs a lot of money to police free speech in these social media platforms, right? You got to pay monitors. You have to set up automated algorithms to be able to check across a really wide swath of highly scaled up users, millions, billions of users, and things of that nature. So that's a cost. That's a real expense that you can scale back if you're doing this. So from that perspective, economically, that also makes sense. I think it also makes sense from the perspective of the idea that at least for half the population that says, there is too much of this free speech, or there isn't enough, I should say, of this free speech advocacy, and there's too much wokeism and all of this kind of stuff. Those individuals, those consumers will say, you know what? I may be more I may look at the platform now more favorably because now I see it as aligned with my own views on the ability to say whatever it is that you want to say out there. So I think there's two reasons. There's a consumer reason which says those that are advocates of, quote, free speech will be more attracted to the platform. And then those operational costs that could be reduced, Frank, are pretty significant in terms of what Meta is facing.
Okay. So you're leading me to my next question. What about advertisers, which are the lifeblood of Meta? I believe they get about 95% of their revenues from ads. How do you see it impacting that part of the business? So not fact-checking is basically cost-cutting, but what about the revenues coming in? Do you see the fact that they're shifting more towards X? And I also want to get your take on how X is operating right now. If they're shifting more towards X, what does that mean about future revenue growth?
It's a great question, Frank. I think there's two forces here that are going on. The first will be there will be a group of enterprise organizations that will say we can't be on that platform. We saw this with X, right? With IBM and other companies that said, hey, we can't allow our messages to be coinciding with other things that might be seen as hate speech or that might be detrimental to our brand. So there is that sort of reaction that's going to say, we'll pull back. Some companies will pull back and say we don't want to be on the platform advertising. However, there'll be a sort of additional counter effect of that, which will be these companies that say we actually do want to be there because they may brand themselves or see themselves, Frank, as kind of these anti-woke sort of brands, this sort of parallel economy kinds of brands. Those brands are probably going to be more attracted. So we're going to see some companies dropping off because of the detrimental effects potentially to their brands and their ideological points of view, but we'll also see some brands coming on board more so as advertising opportunities because of the fact that they see alignment with Meta's new policies in terms of scaling back these different approaches.
A really interesting intersection between commerce and culture when it comes to this decision from Meta. We'll have to wait and see how other companies respond. I got one last question for you. You work down there in Philadelphia. This may decide if we bring you back, Americus. Where's your favorite cheesesteak place?
Pat's, no doubt.
We'll talk later.
Am I coming back?